Okay, so I thought this might be interesting to record because, well, I don't know, because I had to go look at it, and so I figured it might be interesting for other people to see how you look into something like this if they're not familiar with the process. So I happened to see on YouTube a video of something they called a boat glitch in the witness, which was the ability to kind of, or I don't know, the ability, more of just a straight up bug, because I don't think there's anything you could do useful with it. Like, it's not like a speed run thing or anything. But where you can get out of the boat as it kind of comes around this corner over to the side here. And so what I wanted to do is I was like, well, you know, I had not seen literally any bugs reported with the walk system. And so I was a little nervous that maybe this was actually a bug in the walk system, because it certainly seemed like it could be a bug in the walk system. And so what I wanted to do was see if that was true or not. So the first thing I did was I tried to reproduce the problem, and I was able to do so. But with the help of some visualizations, I was able to determine that it actually isn't a bug in the walk system. And the bug is a little bit more amusing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start the boat heading towards the part where the problem is. The problem is kind of like over here as we turn this corner. And I'm going to have it go pretty slowly so that I can kind of explain some things as we go. All right, so the way the collision system in the witness works is that it creates sort of this grid that you can move along, and it determines where that grid is, and if that grid says that you can't go somewhere, then you can't go there. And so I'm going to turn on this thing using a debug console. It's called the walk grid. And what this is this is basically my code is just sort of drawing what it thinks the walkable area is around the player at the time, right? And so you can see that that's basically a fixed grid, and we're just moving through the fixed grid very slowly here. And so you can see that the red lines kind of, they're a little bit subtle because it's, you know, there's other stuff drawing. It's kind of like overlaying it on top of what you can see there. But the red lines are the boundary, and the white lines are the actual sort of grid lines you could walk on. And so when I hit something, I can't go any further, right? When I hit one of these red lines, I can't go any further. And I can stand on any of the white parts. And so one of the things that helps to visualize this, it's because it's a little bit hard to see when you're trying to debug something, is you can go in here and say, well, I want to see the boundary in a very clear way. And so what that does is it basically puts up a fence of red lines to sort of show where it thinks the boundary is around the player. And you can see that I'm kind of standing in this fence right now, so it's pretty clear that I couldn't really ever walk out of here, you know, unless there was a pretty bad bug. But as you can see, what ends up happening if I kind of go, let me now speed the boat up so we can kind of go to where the bug is, or roughly where the bug is. I'll just speed us up briefly there, and then I'll kind of slow us back down. All right, so I'm going to slow us down to a much slower speed here, and we're just going to look at this boundary. And I want you to watch what happens to the boundary of the walkable surface as we come to see it starting to bow out there, see it starting to get bigger, and then it breaks. Okay, so right there I'm just going to stop the boat. Hopefully I stopped it in time. And you can see what happens very, very clearly here. There actually is no glitch in any sort of sense of the standard term of a walk glitch. What there actually is just a full-on complete construction bug. Like, this is actually a place where you can just walk right out here and walk around, right? It's actually got a surface and everything that's been modeled there, right? And you can walk back up in, right? And so it's kind of crazy, like, what's happening there. So let's turn on another debug thing so we can see a little bit better what's going on. What this is going to do is this is going to show us walkable regions. Now, what's kind of interesting from this, and this is an aspect of the witnesses system that's kind of really strange, and I really couldn't say exactly why it was made this way, but basically what happens is in the witnesses editor, the way that they create sort of these like invisible slabs for stuff like things you can walk on when it doesn't come out of like an editor like Maya or something, is there's basically, they create a slab and there's some checkboxes for whether it's like walkable or a collider or whatever. And so what I've done here is I've turned on everything that's marked as walkable, I've turned it on in green. And you can see that there's these slabs, and what's interesting about that is this one right here makes perfect sense, because this is the piece that kind of folds down and allows you to walk out of the boat. So that does make sense as a walkable. But you can see these ones over here, they really should have been marked colliders, but instead they were actually probably walked both, they were probably marked as both. They were probably marked as walkable and colliders. So that's just kind of a modeling bug, but it was a modeling bug that happened very frequently in the witness, unfortunately. And probably we should have made some change to the editor to make that be very clear, but it never was. Anyway, it doesn't really matter because it still works just fine. And since the player is getting blocked by this thing before they could ever stand on it, that itself doesn't produce a bug. But here we see where the real bug is. No one has actually put anything here to stop the player. There's no wall on the boat. Even though there's a wall of geometry there, the actual collision geometry, which is not the geometry of the boat, obviously, the actual collision geometry simply doesn't have anything there. So I can just go ahead and walk right out. Okay? So now the next question is, well, why can't I walk out all the time, right? And the answer to why I can't walk out all the time is actually because most of the time, this ocean surface is too far down, so the walk system thinks there's no way the player should be able to step down there. So if, for example, I was to reverse course in the boat here, right? So I go like this and turn it around, okay? Right? And now I come back here. Now you can see I can no longer step out there. Now there is a walkable surface down there, right? And I could get to it. If I come over here, you can see that it is sort of lighted up as something I could potentially get to at some point. But I can't actually get there because it's so far down that when the walk system looks at the height difference between the boat and it, it's like I can't get there. So really what's been happening this entire time on the boat, and this is, it's one of those things, there's a lot of stuff in game development, right? And probably no one ever thought to go look at how the boat was modeled or something like this. You end up in a situation where nobody ever looks at that, and it just happened to work most of the time. But it's actually completely wrong. Like, this is just not a good idea, right? Because you can step off, if there was anything close enough, you could trivially step off onto it. And of course, there are perhaps plenty of surfaces that you could actually get to that might have been modeled underwater and just were never turned off for any reason. So that's actually what's actually happening with the boat glitch. And I assume that the way that they're going to patch that is to just, I think John doesn't want to add actual walls to the boat. So I think what they were going to do is just remove those extra walkable surfaces so you can't actually stand on them. But that's the boat glitch in a nutshell.